concept of a digital twin is to create a full-scale, photorealistic digital copy of something that's in the real world. So this could be a building, it could be an entire city, it could be a boomerang, it could be a person. So it's a digital replica of what's in the real world. Inside digital twins can be vast amounts of real-time data flowing, which is being collected by the physical asset, and we're looking at it through virtual or mixed or augmented realities, for example. If a business is considering developing and using digital twins, there are a few things they need to think about from a cultural perspective. Firstly, the thing that you're creating is associated with country. And we, as First Nations people, have a very large vested interest in what is on our country. So we therefore have a large invested interest into the digital copy of that country also. We have a huge movement across the world that's focusing on data sovereignty and our rights as First Peoples to own data about us and about our country and about our culture. That means when you're creating a digital twin, you need to be thinking about Indigenous rights around the data and information that's streamed from the digital twin as well. On my country, we have an incredibly important cultural place that was a safe haven for Darug people to access the Parramatta River as we were being colonised. There was a woman who created this property who gave us safe passage. So for generations, we were practising our culture on this piece of land where we couldn't access it anymore. When she passed away, that place became a maternity hospital for women who couldn't give birth safely because they didn't have means, whether they were Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, whether they were women that were not married, all sorts of reasons. They were safe in giving birth on this country also. So the country started holding stories about bringing life into the world, and some of those babies probably didn't make it either. Now, 7 years ago, that country was earmarked for destruction to put a new museum on that parcel of land. And our people protested for 7 years. We took it to the highest court and we lost. So in December 2021, that country was destroyed. Because it had a heritage building on it, there was a requirement to create a digital twin before they destroyed it. So there is a digital twin of that very important and special country for Darug people, but we don't have access to the digital twin. And we also now can't go to the site. So our question as First Nations people is, how do we practice honouring our ancestors, honouring those babies that didn't make it, honouring our cultural practices when it only now exists as a digital twin? I think the difference between Western cultures and First Nations cultures is the importance that we attach to objects and places. It's just a digital twin of a building to the New South Wales government. It is our ancestors and our knowledge systems and our language and everything that is us and country is in that digital twin for our people. This is a very different way of looking at the value of the digital twin. Something that would have been very appropriate for the government to do in undertaking that process is to talk about Indigenous cultural intellectual property and moral rights for the digital twin and for the data and for the metadata. How could our people participate in that process? How could our people have access to the data for that place? And how do we have agency and autonomy about how that digital twin might be used in the future? Businesses that are moving into the era of the metaverse are going to be thinking of a number of things. To access the metaverse, you need avatars. You need digital twins of places, or you need to create new environments. And you need to establish a culture within your particular business in the metaverse. Something that we're seeing a lot of, unfortunately, is the development of avatars, particularly for women, where women who want to access the metaverse are shoehorned into appropriate female bodies. As a First Nations woman, it's absolutely impossible for me to work with any of the avatar generation tools at the moment and express myself as a Darug woman. I can't have my weaving, I can't have my body, I can't have any of my cultural adornments, for example. Conversely, our mob want to be safe in metaverse places. And something that companies are really excited about is that you can turn up as anything or anyone into the metaverse. So you can be a fairy, you can be a rock, you can change genders, you can have no gender, but also means that you could come in as a Darug person if you're not a Darug person, which makes those places unsafe for us. So thinking about when you're creating the way that people are going to interface with your business in the metaverse, how are they being represented? Who can be represented? How do we ensure cultural safety in those spaces? How do we manage identity? These are a number of questions that need to be addressed. I was presenting as a hologram to the other side of our country from the East Coast. So the hologram was being projected in Western Australia as a real-time live hologram. And I was on the stage with 2 other holographic men, which meant that we could see each other in our living rooms as holograms. And one of the men disappeared, but I could still hear him. So I was looking all around for him because you're in 360 degrees and calling out for him, saying I couldn't see him anymore. And he said, no, I'm still here. Make sure you're looking up and down and around. And I looked down and his digital head is in my crutch. And as a woman who's been sexually assaulted and working and doing a live feed presentation, the first things that came out of my mouth was, Dan, your head's in my crutch. And it was one of those moments where I just wanted to melt into under the carpet and just hide forever. And I started thinking about, why was that responsibility on me? Why was I the one that was in the position in the technology having to process that it's just data and light and not actually a man's head in my crutch? These are things that happen when we don't have women on development teams working on technology backbone products. So if there had been a woman on the development team, we would have been thinking about spatial boundaries, even as holograms, because even in a holographic environment, I don't want people in my personal space unless I invite them in there. When businesses are thinking about creating new products and services in critical technologies like metaverse bridging technologies, for example, I think the best thing that they can do is go back to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and look at the articles, because First Nations peoples across the world came together for 20 years before this document was ratified in 2008 to say that this is the floor and not the ceiling of what our expectations are in work, in education, and in expressing our cultural selves. That is applicable today. It's applicable in 2060. All of the articles address every single concern you might be confronted with when you're developing new products and services.